The starship Endeavour moved slowly through the darkness of space. It had traveled for 6 months to reach the system. This was humanity's first real mission to meet a species that had watched the stars for thousands of years before humans had even learned to make fire. Commander Jake stood on the bridge and looked at the main screen. A purple planet filled the view. It was beautiful in a strange way, covered in swirling clouds that glowed with soft light. Around the planet, hundreds of stations floated like silver seeds scattered by the wind. "We are receiving a signal from the orbital station," said Lieutenant Amy Garrison. She was the ship's language expert. She had spent 3 years learning the tongue from old recordings and transmissions. "They are granting us permission to dock." Jake nodded. He was a tall man with kind eyes and gray hair at his temples. He had led many missions before, but none as important as this one. They had refused contact with other species for centuries. When they finally agreed to meet humans, the whole galaxy had been surprised. "Take us in slowly," Jake said to the pilot. "Let them see we mean no harm." The Endeavour glided toward the largest station. As they got closer, Jake could see ships moving around them. They were elegant things, curved and flowing like water frozen in motion. Everything the made seemed designed for beauty. Amy came to stand beside Jake. She was young, with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She held a tablet in her hands and looked worried. "Commander, I need to tell you something about their queen," she said quietly. Jake turned to her. "What is it?" Amy glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. They care very much about how things look. They value smooth skin, pale violet coloring, and perfect symmetry in faces. Their leaders are always chosen partly for their appearance. "And the queen?" Jake asked. "Queen O is different. She was born with dark skin, asymmetrical markings, and ridged features. By standards, she is considered—" Amy paused, searching for the right word. "Ugly, cursed, even. They have a word for her condition. It translates to shadow-touched." Jake frowned. How did she become queen if her people see her that way? "Through intelligence and strength. She won battles that no one else could win. She solved problems that had plagued her world for generations. They had to make her queen because she was simply better than everyone else. But they have never accepted her. They tolerate her because they need her." Jake was quiet for a moment. He looked back at the purple planet and thought about what Amy had told him. A queen who had earned everything through merit alone, yet was still despised for something she could not control. He felt a strange respect for this person he had never met. The docking was smooth. The Endeavour connected to the station with a soft clang of metal. Jake gathered his diplomatic team, which included Amy, a security officer named Ben Carter, and a young doctor named Lisa Park. They walked to the airlock together. "Remember," Jake said to his team, "we are guests here. Be respectful. Watch and learn before you speak." The airlock opened with a hiss. On the other side stood a group of waiting to greet them. Jake had seen pictures of before, but seeing them in person was different. They were tall and thin, with smooth lavender skin that seemed to glow faintly. Their faces were perfectly symmetrical, with large eyes like polished gems and small mouths that curved in permanent slight smiles. They were beautiful by any standard. But Jake noticed something odd. The delegation was arranged in a strange way. Most of them stood to one side, while a single figure stood apart from the rest. This figure wore a dark veil that covered everything except the eyes. Even through the veil, Jake could see that these eyes were different. They were fractured somehow, like a gemstone that had been cracked and put back together. The other were not looking at this figure. In fact, they seemed to be deliberately looking anywhere else. Some had expressions of discomfort on their perfect faces. Jake understood at once. The veiled figure was Queen A. One of the smooth-faced stepped forward. He bowed slightly and spoke in accented but clear English. "Welcome to the Dominion. I am High-Is. We are honored by your presence." Jake noticed that Is had not introduced the Queen. He had not even acknowledged her existence. This was supposed to be her realm, yet she was being treated like a ghost. Jake made a decision. He walked past Iz and stopped directly in front of the veiled figure. The other gasped softly. Iz made a choking sound. "Your Majesty," Jake said, bowing deeply. "I am Commander Jake of the Earthship Endeavor. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for welcoming us to your home." The veiled queen was still for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was low and rough, nothing like the musical tones of the other. "You address me directly," she said. It was not a question. It was an observation, as if she was studying a strange creature she had never seen before. "You are the queen," Jake said simply. It seemed right. Behind the veil, those fractured eyes examined him. Jake did not look away. He met her gaze and held it steady. "Most do not wish to look at me," I said. "Then most are missing out," Jake replied. The silence that followed was heavy. The other did not know what to do. They had never seen anyone treat their queen this way, not with scorn or pity, but with simple respect. Queen made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it was hard to tell. She turned and gestured for the group to follow her. "Come," she said, "let us begin our work. There is much to discuss." As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the station, Amy fell into step beside Jake. "That was unexpected," she whispered. Jake watched the dark figure of the queen walking ahead of them, alone as always. The other kept their distance from her, like she carried some disease they feared to catch. "She is their queen," Jake said quietly. "Someone should treat her like one." Amy looked at him with new eyes. She had worked with Jake for 2 years, but she was still learning things about him. He was not just a good commander, he was a good man. The station was magnificent. Crystal walls caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. Gardens filled with exotic plants lined the walkways. Everywhere Jake looked, he saw beauty carefully arranged and maintained. But he also saw the way servants scrambled out of the queen's path. He saw how guards turned their faces away when she passed. He saw how even the walls seemed to dim slightly in her presence, as if the station itself was programmed to reject her. And through it all, Queen walked with her head high, her back straight, her steps steady. She had lived with this treatment her entire life. She had learned to carry it without breaking. Jake felt something stir in his chest. It was anger, but also admiration. This queen had been handed nothing but cruelty, and she had turned it into a throne. She ruled people who despised her, protected them, led them, sacrificed for them. And they could not even look at her. Jake decided something in that moment. Whatever happened in these negotiations, whatever treaties were signed or rejected, he would make sure that this queen knew one thing before he left. She was not ugly, she was not cursed, she was remarkable. And he would tell her so, even if the whole galaxy thought he was mad. The banquet hall was the most beautiful room Jake had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that sang softly when wind passed through them. The ceiling was transparent, showing the purple planet below and the stars above. Long tables stretched across the floor, covered in white cloth and golden plates. Hundreds sat at these tables. They wore flowing robes of pale colors, and their smooth faces glowed in the soft light. Servants moved between them, carrying trays of food and drinks that Jake could not name. The human delegation had been given seats of honor near the front of the hall. Jake sat with Amy on his right and Ben on his left. Lisa sat across from them, her eyes wide as she took in the strange beauty of everything around her. But Jake was not looking at the decorations or the food. He was looking at the head of the hall, where a single chair sat on a raised platform. It was the Queen's seat, and it was surrounded by empty space. Queen sat alone. The nearest guests were 10 feet away from her, their chairs angled so they did not have to see her. She still wore her veil, and she ate slowly, her movements careful and precise. No one spoke to her. No one even glanced in her direction. Around Jake, the at nearby tables were whispering. Their language was musical, but Amy had taught Jake to recognize certain words. He heard shadow touched several times. He heard other words that Amy had told him meant cursed and unlucky and monster. They were talking about their own queen, in her own hall, at her own banquet. Amy leaned close to Jake. "This is worse than I expected," she said quietly. "I knew she was isolated, but this is cruel." Jake nodded. He watched a young servant approach the queen's table with a pitcher of wine. The servant's hands were shaking so badly that some wine spilled on the tablecloth. The servant let out a cry of fear and dropped to the floor, bowing and begging forgiveness. The nearby reacted with horror, but not horror at the accident. Horror that the queen might touch the servant, might curse her somehow. Parents pulled their children closer. Guards stepped forward as if to protect the crowd from their own ruler. Queen simply waved her hand, dismissing the servant gently. She did not punish the girl. She did not even raise her voice. But the other acted as if something terrible had happened. Jake had seen enough. He stood up from his seat. The movement drew attention. Hundreds of gem-like eyes turned toward him. The whispers stopped. "Commander," Amy hissed, "what are you doing?" Jake did not answer. He picked up his plate and his glass and walked toward the queen's platform. The crowd parted before him, scrambling to get out of his path. He heard gasps and saw expressions of shock and disbelief. He climbed the steps to the platform and stopped beside the empty space near the queen's table. "Your Majesty," he said, "may I join you for dinner? I find I do not enjoy eating alone." The hall was completely silent. Everyone was staring at him now. High-Is had risen from his seat, his smooth face twisted with something that looked like anger. Queen turned her veiled face toward Jake. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she gestured to the empty chair beside her. "You are brave or foolish," she said. "Perhaps both. Sit, Commander." Jake sat. He placed his plate on her table and began to eat as if nothing unusual had happened. The food was strange but good, some kind of sweet fruit wrapped in thin leaves. Slowly the noise in the hall returned. The whispers started again, louder now. Jake ignored them. He focused on the queen beside him. "The food is excellent," he said casually. "Do you have a favorite dish?" Was still for a moment. Then she made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. "No one has ever asked me that," she said. "Then I am honored to be the first." The queen lifted a small piece of fruit with a utensil Jake did not recognize. "This," she said. "It grows only in the northern mountains of my world. It is considered a weed, too dark and bitter for most tastes, but I find it honest. It does not pretend to be something it is not." Jake nodded. "I think I understand." They ate in silence for a while. Around them, the banquet continued, but it was different now. They kept glancing at the queen's table, watching the human who sat beside their cursed ruler as if he was not afraid of her at all. "You will damage your reputation," said eventually. "They will think you are touched by my curse." Jake shrugged. "I have never cared much about what people think of me. That is a luxury few can afford." Perhaps, or perhaps it is a choice that anyone can make if they are willing to accept the consequences. The queen was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Why did you do this? What do you want from me?" Jake put down his utensil and turned to face her fully. "Your Majesty, I want nothing. I simply do not believe in watching someone eat alone while others whisper about her." "You pity me." "No, I respect you. There is a difference." Behind her veil, A's fractured eyes caught the light. Jake could see them now, reflecting the crystal walls like broken stars. They were beautiful to him, though he knew she would not believe that if he told her. After the banquet, the other diplomats returned to their quarters on the Endeavor. But Jake stayed. He requested a private audience with the queen, and after much confusion and protest from the advisors, agreed. They met in her private chamber. It was a small room compared to the grand halls outside, filled with simple furniture and books stacked on every surface. Jake realized that this was where she truly lived, away from the ceremonies and the starring crowds. Stood by a window that looked out at the stars. She had not removed her veil. "Your request surprised my advisors," she said. "No outsider has ever sought time alone with me. They wonder what scheme you are planning." "I have no scheme," Jake said. "I only wanted to speak with you without an audience." "Why?" Jake thought about how to answer. He walked to the window and stood beside her, looking out at the same stars. "Because I think you have spent your whole life being watched but never seen," he said. "I wanted to see you." Turned to face him. Slowly her hands rose to her veil. She hesitated, then pulled it away. Jake looked at her face for the first time. Her skin was deep indigo, dark as the space between stars. Silver markings ran across her features in patterns that were not quite even, not quite symmetrical. Ridges of bone lined her forehead and cheekbones, giving her face a fierce, warrior-like appearance. Her eyes were indeed fractured, the gem-like surface cracked and scattered like light through a prism. She was nothing like the smooth, pale who surrounded her. She was different. She was unique. Jake smiled. "Why do you smile?" I asked. Her voice was tense, as if she was waiting for cruelty. "Because you are beautiful," Jake said simply. The Queen stared at him. "Do not mock me, human." "I am not mocking you. I am telling you the truth. My own people cannot bear to look at me. Mothers hide their children from my sight. I am called monster and curse and shadow, and you tell me I am beautiful." Jake nodded, "Yes." I shook her head slowly. "You are very strange, Commander Jake." "Perhaps, but I am also honest." He gestured to her face. "On my world there are people who would find your appearance striking, remarkable, something to be admired, not feared. Your world sounds very different from mine." "It is, but it does not have to stay that way. That is why I came here, not just to sign treaties but to build bridges between our people, to share ideas and perspectives." The Queen looked out at the stars again. Her face was unreadable, but Jake thought he saw something shift in her fractured eyes, something that might have been hope, buried under years of pain. "You are either the most honest man I have ever met," she said quietly, "or the most skilled liar." Jake laughed softly. "I have been called many things, but never a skilled liar. Ask my crew. They will tell you I am terrible at hiding my feelings." For the first time, Queen smiled. It changed her whole face, softened the fierce lines, and made her eyes glow warmly. "Then perhaps we shall talk more, Commander," she said. "I find I enjoy your strange honesty." "I would like that very much, Your Majesty." And so began a friendship that would change two worlds forever. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Jake had expected when he began this mission. The official negotiations moved slowly, as such things always do. There were meetings about trade routes, discussions about cultural exchange, arguments about boundaries and permissions. Hayes led most of these talks, his smooth face always wearing a polite smile that never reached his cold eyes. But outside the meeting rooms, something else was growing. Jake and Queen met often, sometimes to discuss diplomacy, but more often simply to talk. She was curious about humanity, about Earth, about the strange ways humans saw the world, and Jake found himself equally curious about her. They walked through the station gardens together, ignoring the shocked stares of passing. They shared meals in her private chamber, away from the whispers of the court. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. One evening, Jake brought something special to their meeting. He carried a small device that projected images into the air. "I want to show you something," he said. Sat in her favorite chair, her dark face curious. She no longer wore her veil when they were alone. Jake had learned to read her expressions, the way her ridged brow lifted when she was interested, the way her fractured eyes narrowed when she was thinking. Jake activated the device. An image appeared in the air between them. It was a painting of a human woman, her face and weathered, her eyes strong and proud. "This is a painting from Earth," Jake explained. The artist was famous for painting people who were considered different, people with scars, people with unusual features, people who did not fit the common idea of beauty. I studied the image. Your people keep pictures of those who are flawed. We do not see them as flawed, we see them as interesting. This woman was a warrior who lost half her face in battle. The artist painted her because he thought she was beautiful, not despite her scars but because of them, because they told a story, because they showed who she really was. Jake showed her more images, photographs of humans with conditions that changed their appearance, paintings of bodies that were different, celebrated rather than hidden, art that honored the broken, the unique. Amy had helped him prepare translations of human poetry that spoke of these ideas. Jake read some of them too, words about finding beauty in darkness, words about strength born from suffering, words about loving the parts of ourselves that others reject. I listened in silence. Her fractured eyes reflected the images floating before her. When Jake finished, she did not speak for a long time. "Your people truly believe this?" she finally asked. "That those who are different can be beautiful?" "Not all of us. Humans are not perfect. We have our own cruelty, our own prejudices. But many of us believe that beauty is not about matching some ideal form. It is about being true to yourself, about carrying your story with dignity." The Queen rose from her chair and walked to the window. Outside, the purple planet turned slowly beneath them. Stars burned in the endless black. "I have never been told such things," she said quietly. "From my first breath I was taught that I was wrong, broken, a mistake of nature that should never have been allowed to live." Jake went to stand beside her. "That was cruel of them." "Perhaps, but I learned to use it. I could not be loved, so I became useful instead. I studied when others played. I trained when others rested. I made myself so skilled that they could not ignore me, even if they could not accept me." She touched the glass of the window with one dark finger. "I won my crown in battle. I killed the warlord who threatened to tear our empire apart. I solved the water crisis that was destroying our northern provinces. I negotiated peace with species that had been our enemies for generations." "And still they treat you this way," Jake said. "Yes, because no amount of success can change what I am. I am shadow-touched. I am cursed. I am everything my people fear and hate." Jake felt anger rise in his chest, not at her but for her. He thought of all the things she had accomplished, all the lives she had saved, all the good she had done. And none of it mattered to her own people because her face did not meet their standards. "Come with me," he said suddenly. I turned to look at him. "Where?" "I want to show you something." He led her through the station to a transport pod. They flew down to the planet's surface, to a place said few people ever visited. It was a garden, hidden in a valley between two mountains. The garden was not beautiful by standards. The plants here were dark and twisted. They grew in strange shapes, their leaves mottled with colors that did not match. Flowers bloomed in shades of deep purple and black, their petals uneven and wild. "This is my garden," I said softly. "I have kept it secret for many years." Jake looked around in wonder. There was something magical about this place. It was wild and untamed, but there was a beauty to it that the ordered gardens of the station could never match. "What is this place?" he asked. "These are the rejected plants, the ones the gardeners pull up and throw away because they are ugly, because they grow wrong, because they do not fit the standard." I knelt beside a twisted flower with petals like dark velvet. "I have been saving them since I was a child. I bring them here where they can live." Jake knelt beside her. The flower was strange and beautiful. It looked like something from a dream, something that should not exist but did anyway. "I understand them," I continued. "They did not ask to be born different. They did not choose to grow in ways that offend others. They simply are what they are. Jake reached out and touched the dark petals gently. This flower is beautiful. I shook her head. It is defective. No, it is rare. Jake looked up at her, like you. The queen stared at him. Her fractured eyes caught the light of the setting sun, scattering it into 1,000 colors. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but did not cry, or at least Jake had never seen one do so. You say such strange things, she whispered. I say true things. I know you do not believe them yet, but I hope that one day you will. They sat in the garden as the sun set, surrounded by the rejected plants that I had saved. Jake told her stories about Earth, about the mountains and oceans, about the people who had learned to celebrate their differences instead of hiding them. I listened, her dark face thoughtful. Do you truly believe I could be seen as beautiful? She asked finally. I do not just believe it, I know it. Beauty is not about matching some perfect standard. It is about being real, being brave, being yourself even when the world tells you that yourself is not enough. Jake smiled at her. You have been yourself against impossible odds. That is more beautiful than any smooth face or pale skin. I was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more vulnerable than Jake had ever heard it. I think I am beginning to understand why humans have survived so long in the universe, she said. You see things that others miss. You find value where others see only waste. We try, we do not always succeed, but we try. The queen stood and looked out over her garden of rejected plants. The last light of the sun painted her dark skin with gold and red. In that moment, Jake thought she looked like a goddess from an ancient story, standing between darkness and light. Thank you, Jake, she said, for showing me that another way of seeing is possible. Thank you for letting me see your garden, and for letting me see you. She turned to face him, and for the first time, Jake saw something in her fractured eyes that looked like hope. It was a small thing, a tiny flame in the darkness, but small things have a way of growing, and Jake knew that this small flame had the power to change everything. He did not know then how much change was coming. He did not know about the storm that was brewing in the shadows, but in that moment, in the garden of rejected flowers, he knew one thing for certain. He would stand beside this queen. Whatever came next, he would not let her face it alone. That was a promise he intended to keep. High stood in his private chambers, staring at the holographic display before him. His smooth face wore no expression, but his eyes burned with cold fire. He had watched the human commander grow close to the queen. He had watched their walks through the gardens, their private dinners, their long conversations. It disgusted him. The shadow-touched queen was bad enough. She was a stain on the Dominion, a reminder of everything their perfect species should not be. But to see her now, laughing with a human, sharing secrets with an outsider, it was more than Iz could bear. He turned to the figure standing in the shadows behind him. It was a military officer named Counselor N, one of his most loyal followers. The people are already whispering, N said. They say the queen has been corrupted by the humans. They say she cares more about these outsiders than her own kind. Iz nodded slowly. Good, we will give them more to whisper about. What do you mean? Iz touched a control on his desk. A new image appeared on the display. It was a document, carefully crafted, bearing the queen's personal seal. This document will show that our beloved queen has been secretly negotiating to surrender territory to the humans. It will prove that she has betrayed our people for the friendship of these aliens. N's eyes widened. But that is a lie, she would never do such a thing. The truth does not matter, only what people believe. Iz smiled coldly. When this evidence is revealed, the council will have no choice but to remove her from power, and as senior I will take her place. And the humans? They will be expelled, their treaty will be rejected, the Dominion will return to its pure isolation, free from outside corruption. Iz turned to face N fully. This is how it must be. Our people have tolerated that creature on the throne for too long. It is time to correct nature's mistake. The next morning, Jake woke to alarms. Amy burst into his quarters on the Endeavor, her face pale with shock. "Commander, something terrible has happened. The Queen has been arrested." Jake was on his feet in seconds. Arrested? On what charge? Treason. They say she was planning to surrender our entire sector to human control. They have documents with her seal on them. Jake felt his blood turn cold. That is impossible. She would never do that. I know, but the Council has declared her a traitor. She is being held in the detention center until her trial. Jake grabbed his uniform and began dressing. Where is this trial? When does it happen? Tomorrow. By their ancient laws, she must face something called the right of exposure. She will stand before all her people, unveiled and undefended, and speak for herself. Then we need to prove her innocence before then. Jake gathered his crew. Ben Carter used his security training to analyze the supposedly secret documents. Lisa Park examined the seals and signatures. Amy translated every word, looking for mistakes or inconsistencies. It did not take long to find the truth. "The seal is real," Ben said, "but it was from another document. See here, the edges are too clean. This was digitally transferred, not stamped directly." "And the language is wrong," Amy added. "Queen writes formally, but this document uses casual forms that she would never use in official communication. Whoever wrote this does not know her well." "It is," Jake said. His voice was flat with certainty. "It has to be. He has wanted her gone since the beginning." "We need proof," Lisa said. "Without evidence linking him to this forgery, no one will believe us." Jake thought quickly. Who would help the Queen? Who in this place actually cares about her? Amy hesitated. The servants, the ones she has protected over the years. She has never punished them harshly, never treated them cruelly. Some of them remember. Find them, talk to them. Someone must have seen something. While the crew scattered to investigate, Jake went to the detention center. He demanded to see the Queen. The guards refused at first, but Jake used every diplomatic trick he knew. Finally, they let him through. Sat in a bare cell, her wrists bound with glowing restraints. Without her veil, her dark face was exposed to the harsh lights. She looked tired, but her eyes still burned with defiance. "You should not have come," she said when she saw him. "They will say you are part of the conspiracy." "I do not care what they say." Jake knelt before the bars of her cell. "We know you are innocent. We are finding proof." The Queen shook her head slowly. "It does not matter. The Council has decided. The people have chosen to believe the lie. Even if you find proof, they will not accept it." "Then make them accept it. Stand before them tomorrow and tell them the truth." "You do not understand." A's voice was heavy with decades of pain. "My people have always wanted a reason to destroy me. Now they have one. Truth will not save me. Nothing will." Jake reached through the bars and took her bound hands in his. "I will not accept that. You have fought your whole life. Do not stop now. Fighting is easy when you have something to fight for. But I am tired, Jake. I am tired of being hated for existing. Perhaps it would be better if I simply disappeared." Jake squeezed her hands tightly. "Listen to me. You are not alone anymore. You have friends who believe in you, people who see your worth. Do not give up, not now, not when we are so close to changing everything." The Queen looked into his eyes. Her fractured gaze searched his face for any sign of deception. She found none. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "I am nothing to you, a stranger from a distant star. Why does my fate matter?" Jake smiled gently. "Because I have seen who you truly are, and that person deserves to be free, to be happy, to be seen the way I see you." A guard approached, signaling that visiting time was over. Jake stood but did not release her hands. "Tomorrow, when you stand before your people, remember one thing," he said. "You are not ugly. You are not cursed. You are the strongest person I have ever met, and I will be there standing with you. I blinked rapidly. You would risk that. If I fall, you fall with me. Then we fall together, but I do not intend to fall. Back on the Endeavor, the crew worked through the night. Ben found a servant named I who had seen his meeting with suspicious figures in the days before the accusation. Amy discovered records showing that Iz had accessed the Queen's official seal without authorization. Lisa uncovered a trail of communications between Iz and military officers who had long opposed the human treaty. By morning, they had enough. Jake stood before his crew, the evidence gathered on his tablet. The trial begins in 2 hours. We have one chance to save her. Commander, Amy said carefully, if we do this, we are intervening in an internal political matter. It could destroy any hope of a treaty. It could mean war. Jake nodded. I know, but some things are more important than treaties. Ben stepped forward. I am with you, Commander. Lisa nodded. So am I. Amy smiled grimly. Then let us go save a queen. They left the Endeavor together, carrying the truth with them like a weapon. The Great Plaza was already filling with millions watching on screens across the planet. It was the most important day in history. And humanity was about to make sure it ended the right way. The Great Plaza was a sea of. Thousands stood in perfect rows, their smooth faces turned toward the central platform. Millions more watched through on every world in the Dominion. This was the rite of exposure, an ancient ceremony that had not been performed in 500 years. The accused would stand alone. No lawyer, no defender, no protection. They would face their people with nothing but their words and their truth, and the people would judge. Jake stood at the edge of the plaza with his crew. Ben carried the evidence they had gathered. Amy held translations ready. Lisa kept watch for any sign of treachery from Iz. Iz stood on the platform, his smooth face arranged in a mask of sorrow. He played his part well, the reluctant leader forced to expose his own queen's crimes. People of the Dominion, he announced, his voice carrying across the silent crowd, today we witness a sad moment in our history. Our queen, she whom we have tolerated despite her affliction, has betrayed us all. The evidence is clear. She planned to surrender our sovereignty to the humans. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake saw fear on the faces around him. Fear of the outsiders, fear of change, fear of everything different. Iz raised his hand for silence. But we are just people. We do not condemn without allowing the accused to speak. Let the shadow-touched come forward and face her judgment. The crowd parted. A path opened from the detention center to the platform, and down that path walked Queen. She wore no veil. Her dark face was exposed to the harsh sunlight, her asymmetrical markings visible for all to see. The ridges on her brow cast shadows across her features. Her fractured eyes caught the light and scattered it like a broken rainbow. The crowd recoiled. Parents covered their children's eyes. Some turned away entirely, unable to bear the sight of their queen's face. But walked on. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. She climbed the platform and stood facing her people, alone as she had always been. Iz smiled coldly. You see, even now she offends us with her presence. How can such a creature claim to lead our people? Her very existence is a curse upon our civilization. Some in the crowd shouted agreement. Others whispered behind their hands. The noise grew louder, a wave of rejection and hatred building toward the queen. Raised her head and spoke. Her voice was not loud, but something about it cut through the noise. The crowd fell silent. I have led you for 40 years, she said. In that time, I have defended our borders against 3 invasions. I have expanded our trade routes to 17 new systems. I have negotiated peace with the Empire when war would have destroyed us. I have guided our people through famine, plague, and crisis. She took a step forward. I have done all of this while every one of you looked away from me, while your children were taught to fear my face, while your servants trembled in my presence, while you plotted behind my back." Her fractured eyes swept across the crowd. "You call me ugly, you call me cursed, you say I am a mistake of nature, but I have never hidden from my duty. I have never betrayed my people for power or position." She turned to faces directly. "Can you say the same?" The high, smooth face flickered with something that might have been fear, but he recovered quickly. "These are desperate words from a desperate traitor. The evidence speaks for itself." Jake knew this was the moment. He pushed through the crowd toward the platform, ignoring the gasps and protests of the around him. Ben followed close behind. "The evidence is a lie," Jake called out as he climbed the platform steps. The crowd erupted in chaos. Guards moved to stop him, but raised her hand. "Let him speak." Jake faced the millions watching. "I am Commander Jake of the Earthship Endeavor. I have come to present proof that High is manufactured the evidence against your queen." He activated his tablet, projecting the evidence for all to see. The seal, the wrong language patterns, the unauthorized access to royal systems, the communications between Iz and his conspirators, the testimony of witnesses who had seen his treachery. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded before them. Iz backed away, his smooth face twisting with panic. "This is human deception. They are trying to protect their puppet queen." "Then explain this," Amy said, stepping forward with her own tablet. She played a recording that I had secretly made, showing Iz discussing his plan with N. His own voice condemned him, speaking of his hatred for the shadow-touched queen and his desire to seize power. The plaza fell completely silent. Every eye was on Iz now. The High looked around wildly, searching for support, but his allies had melted away. N was nowhere to be seen. The guards who had supported him now stood with their weapons pointed at him. "Arrest him," Queen commanded. It was not a request. It was the voice of a queen who had finally found her moment. Guards moved forward and seized Iz, dragging him away as he screamed protests that no one listened to. But the trial was not over. Jake turned to face the crowd. "I have one more thing to say, not as a diplomat or a commander, but as a man who has come to know your queen." He walked to her and stood beside her. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "On my world we have a saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It means that what one person finds ugly, another may find beautiful. What one society rejects, another may treasure." He looked at the queen, at her dark face and fractured eyes and ridged brow. He saw the fear and hope warring in her expression. "I have traveled across the stars and met many species. I have seen smooth faces and rough faces, pale skin and dark skin, symmetry and asymmetry. And I want to tell you all something that I believe with my whole heart." He turned back to the crowd. "Your queen is not cursed, she is not a mistake, she is not ugly, she is one of the most remarkable people I have ever met. And the fact that you cannot see that is not her failure, it is yours." He faced her fully and smiled. "Your Majesty, may I say something?" She nodded, her voice lost. Jake spoke loud enough for every microphone to capture. "You are gorgeous." I stared at him, her fractured eyes were wide with shock. "Why do you call me gorgeous? I am ugly." Jake just smiled. "No, you are exactly as you should be, and anyone who cannot see that is the one who is blind." The silence stretched across the plaza. No one moved, no one breathed. Then something unexpected happened. A small child pulled free from her mother's grip. She was young, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with the smooth face and pale skin of her kind. But her eyes were bright with curiosity, not fear. She walked across the plaza, through the frozen crowd, up the steps of the platform. She stopped in front of the queen and looked up at her dark face. "I think you look like the night sky," the child said simply. "I like the night sky, it is full of stars." I knelt down slowly, bringing herself to the child's level. Her fractured eyes reflected the little girl's face. "You are not afraid of me?" the queen asked softly. The child shook her head. "Why would I be afraid? You are the queen, you keep us safe." Something broke in her then. Something that had been frozen for decades, wrapped in armor to protect against endless cruelty. Her eyes filled with tears that began to fall like silver rain. And then others came forward, servants who remembered her kindness, soldiers who had fought under her command, common people who had benefited from her rule but never dared to say so. One by one they approached the platform. They looked at their queen, really looked at her perhaps for the first time, and they did not turn away. Jake stepped back, watching as the people began to change before his eyes. It was a small beginning, a crack in centuries of prejudice, but small cracks have a way of spreading. The treaty was signed that day, not as a political arrangement, but as a promise between two peoples who had learned to see each other clearly. Queen ruled for many more years, her veil forever abandoned. Not everyone accepted her. Change is slow and some hatred runs too deep. But the little girl who loved the night sky grew up telling others that their queen was beautiful, and her children told their children, and the story spread. Jake returned to Earth eventually, but he came back often. Some said there was more between him and the queen than friendship. Others said it did not matter. What mattered was that a single human's refusal to look away had planted a seed. A seed that taught an empire that beauty was never about perfection. It was about being seen. And in the darkness between stars, where no light can reach, sometimes being seen is the most beautiful thing of all.